For decades, we've been told a very simple story. Eat less meat and you'll live a longer, healthier life. But what if the data from two massive countries tells a shocking, completely different story? We're about to unpack a paradox that pretty much flips conventional health wisdom right on its head. Okay, just look at this contrast because it is staggering. On one hand, you've got Hong Kong. They are, per person, the world's #1 consumer of meat. And yet, they also have the world's longest life expectancy and a population that's generally pretty slim. Then you've got India, where somewhere between 30 and 40% of the population is strictly vegetarian. Their life expectancy is a full 15 years lower, and they're battling some of the highest rates of diabetes and heart disease on the entire planet. So this brings us to the big question, right? I mean, everything we've been told for years suggests the complete opposite should be true. So how on earth is this possible? Let's peel back the layers here and see what the source material is really suggesting. All right, let's start with Hong Kong's secret. The data forces us to ask a pretty radical question. What if their long lives aren't in spite of all the meat they eat, but maybe, just maybe, it's because of it? According to the source, the answer is all about the specific way they eat. So when we actually look at a typical plate in Hong Kong, it's not just a lean chicken breast. They practice what's called nose-to-tail eating. That means they eat the organs, the skin, the cartilage, the whole animal. They fully embrace rich animal fats, and they slow cook bones into these incredibly nutrient-dense broths. The key takeaway is they're not just eating muscle. And according to the source, this way of eating has a profound effect on one very specific, very powerful hormone. A hormone that, frankly, controls way more of our health than most of us ever realize. And yep, that hormone is insulin. Now, its main job, as we know, is to manage blood sugar, but the source calls it the obesity hormone. And why is that? Because when your insulin levels are high, it's like a loud, blaring signal telling your body to stop burning fat for fuel and start storing it instead. The source also links constantly high insulin to faster aging. And this chart, wow, this chart illustrates the whole concept perfectly. Look at that huge spike from refined carbs. We're talking sugar, bread, white rice. It sends insulin through the roof. But now look at protein and animal fat. See that? It's barely a blip. It has a minimal, stable effect. So the Hong Kong diet, because it's so rich in fat and protein, keeps that insulin line low and steady. So what's the results of that stable blood sugar? Well, you feel full and satisfied for much, much longer, which means you're not constantly reaching for snacks. At the exact same time, the source claims these animal fats are the essential building blocks for strong cell membranes and are absolutely critical for protecting your brain. Okay, so that's one half of this puzzle. Now we have to flip over to the other side. India's vegetarian paradox. We really have to understand why a diet that we're told is so healthy is correlated, according to this source, with such poor health outcomes. The source argues that the single most dangerous combination in our modern diet, it's not fat and sugar, it's refined carbohydrates combined with processed vegetable and seed oils. And when we look at the modern Indian vegetarian plate, we see that exact combination in action, everywhere. The diet is built on these high carbohydrate staples like white rice, wheat flour in naan and chapati, lentils, potatoes. And then meals are often followed by sugary drinks and desserts, and a lot of the food is fried in modern processed seed oils like canola or soy. So this combination just sends your blood sugar on a wild roller coaster. It spikes dramatically, which forces your body to release a flood of insulin to deal with it. And what does all that insulin do? Well, it takes all that excess sugar and converts it directly into fat, specifically that dangerous visceral fat that gets stored right around your internal organs. So we've seen two very different diets with two very, very different outcomes. And all of this leads the source to identify the real villains in this story. And I promise you, they are not what you'd expect. The source concludes that the true culprit behind these modern diseases is what it calls a carbohydrate bomb, one that's very often disguised as a healthy, low-fat vegetarian diet. Now, to really understand this, we have to rethink another one of those big dietary villains, cholesterol. We've been taught to fear it for decades, but the source argues that cholesterol itself isn't the problem. The real problem, the thing that really kicks off heart disease, is chronic inflammation. This slide compares the two scenarios perfectly. On the left, with a diet rich in traditional fats, the source claims your artery walls stay healthy and smooth. But on the right, that combination of high sugar and processed oils is said to create constant inflammation. The best way to think of it is like a little fire burning inside your arteries. So cholesterol rushes to the scene to try and patch the damage, but in that fiery, inflamed environment, it becomes oxidized and sticky, and that is what builds up as dangerous plaque. So, if we take this entire argument seriously, what does it actually mean for our own food choices? It suggests that we might need to completely rethink what a healthy plate even looks like. The fundamental argument here is really an evolutionary one. For the vast majority of human history, our bodies were adapted to run primarily on animal protein and fat. The agricultural revolution, and especially this recent modern explosion of sugar and processed foods, is a very new experiment that our bodies are just not equipped to handle. So, based on all this, the source's advice is surprisingly straightforward. Step 1, significantly reduce those carbohydrate bombs like sugar, bread, and pasta. Step 2, replace that empty space on your plate with fresh, quality meat. And step 3, don't fear traditional animal fats. In fact, use things like butter for cooking and flavor. This entire analysis leaves us with one pretty provocative final question. It forces us to look at our own plates, the low-fat yogurt, the whole wheat bread, the vegetable oil, and to ask, could our own attempts to be healthy actually be the real problem?